Hello, everyone. Today is Thursday, June 4th, 2020, and I'd like to start off by thanking each and every one of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to tune in today. I'd like to thank University of Baltimore's College of Arts and Sciences, and sincerest thanks to Professor Davis, who's the head of the History Department, Professor Holloman, and Professor Cotton from the Legal Studies Department for helping me facilitate this conversation today. Welcome to the discussion about the death of George Floyd, race, and civil unrest in America. Before we get started, I want to lay out some house rules or Zoom etiquette for everyone. We want this event to be a healthy and safe space for all people to intellectually share thoughts, feelings, ideas, and to ask or answer any questions equally. This is not a debate. And nor is it a competition. So don't feel like your ideas are, don't feel like it's a competition to have the best argument or the best idea in any way. It's just a space for people to express ideas and feelings. People will have different ideas or perspectives from yours, and we must respect one another and simply listen. This is an educational opportunity for all of us, professors, students, staff, everybody. One person will speak at a time. You must use the hand raising tool to get a chance to speak. Each person will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to speak or to ask a question. Professor Holloman and I will be keeping track of time. When you are given a chance to speak, one of the co-hosts will unmute your mic for you. And if you unmute your mic out of turn, you will be given one warning, and the next time you will be removed from the discussion. You may ask questions anonymously via the chat box. You may not share your screen or share any files. You may not disrespect or violate one another or any other person in any way. And you may not violate any of the UB codes of conduct. And if you do, you will be removed from the discussion. Does anyone have any questions about the house rules? All right. So for those who do not know me, I'm your MC. I'm Ashlyn Woods. I helped organize this symposium, and I'm happy to be here to share this moment with you. I'm a senior here at UB. My major is jurisprudence with a concentration in the early entry to law school program. I'm a senator in SGA, and I work in the campus pantry under the Rosenberg Center for Student Involvement. I am a 2020-2021 Newman Civic Fellow. I'm a Fannie Angelos LSAT awardee and a very passionate lover of history and legal studies. And without further ado, I'll let my co-hosts introduce themselves and then we will begin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Professor Cotton. I teach in the Legal Studies program along with Professor Holloman, who will meet in a couple minutes. And I'm really here to listen. That's all I have to say.
Hi, everyone. I'm Professor Davis in the history program. I am also here to listen. I teach courses on African American history, civil rights, also a course on prisons and police in US history. I'm interested in this, of course, as a citizen, as a human being, and also as a researcher. I've been working on a book on the history of the relationship between police and civil rights activists in the 60s. So this is very interesting for me.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Justin Holloman. I'm a professor at the University of Baltimore, but I'm also a practicing attorney. I was a public defender for 3 years, and those that know anything about criminal justice know that public defenders are the frontline fighters for social rights and civil rights issues. This issue hits home especially close to me, because not only am I a professor and an attorney, but when I leave the courtroom or leave the classroom, I'm no different than Mr. Floyd, and that's why I'm here.
All right, thank y'all so much. I hope you all are aware that on May 25th, 2020, a 46-year-old unarmed, handcuffed Black man was smothered to death in broad daylight by 3 Minneapolis police officers, and another one was there watching. Former Officer Derek Chauvin was recorded kneeling on the back of Floyd's neck for almost 9 minutes as Floyd pleaded for his life several times. Floyd screamed that he couldn't breathe several times, and Chauvin remained on his neck, even while bystanders screamed and yelled for him to get off of him. Chauvin did not remove his knee until the ambulance showed up, which was almost 9 minutes, 10 minutes later after the fact. At this point, Floyd was lifeless and we all saw it. Luckily, since then, the former police officers involved have all been charged with various degrees from second-degree murder to aiding and abetting a murder. Local and private autopsies have been conducted, and one of those have actually confirmed that the death was a homicide and it was caused by asphyxiation. Peaceful and sometimes violent protests have erupted all over the world, London, Nigeria, and all over the United States. And I'm still in shock, and I'm still sad and hurting and grieving for the loss of George Floyd. And I hope this conversation can be the beginning of change. And one thing that makes me sick to my stomach about it is that my mom is 46 years old, and I have a Black brother and a Black father, and it could have been one of them. It could have been, one of my cousins or my uncle. That's how I feel about it. And I question myself every day, and I wonder, like, why are Black people continuously being targeted and killed and executed by police with no justice? And it just continuously shows that, like, we are traumatized by things like this, even though it may not seem like it, but it's something that has been deeply rooted even since slavery, and even, and it has lasted until this day. So it's so confusing, and it's so, like, it's something that it's been hard to, like, grapple with, because all we ever did was be Black. We haven't really done anything to anyone. We have not, even after slavery, even after being killed and lynched for entertainment, there's no justice. It's no type of reparations, or even simple acknowledgement that slavery existed and caused such consequences today. So hopefully this conversation can help bring some of those things to light and help create a cultural change, not only within UB, but hopefully within Baltimore, and then Maryland, and then the entire US. Like, hopefully we can have a trickle effect over time. And I was just wondering, like, who here hasn't seen the video? I have the link available for you in the chat box. Let me know if you can see it. And if you can't see it, I'll try to send it to you directly, and you can watch it on your own, in your own time. Yeah, I couldn't watch it. Well, I actually forced myself to watch it, but if I didn't force myself to watch it, I don't know if I would have the same passion as I do now if I didn't watch the video. Yeah, so for some people, what made you choose to watch the video or not? You can go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to answer that question. Like, what made you want to answer the video? Watch the video?
Hello guys, my name is Ted and I'm a history student here at University of Baltimore. I felt it was necessary for me to watch the video because I felt like in this case we were lucky to have a video so we could have this sitting here clear as day and there's no refutable evidence. And I just think about all the other cases that we had no video evidence that could have maybe has swayed the outcome in a different way.
Anybody else who
I just want to say that I think that all white people should watch that video. It's horrifying, it's gut-wrenching, but in order to get any appreciation for the deep level of heartbreak involved here and the cruelty, it should be required watching for white people.
Deja Renee, you can go ahead and unmute.
So my main reasoning for watching the video, first of all, it popped up on my Instagram feed, and at first I was like, oh, this is just gonna be, I felt bad because I was desensitized by how many videos I saw of Black people getting arrested. But then I saw that it was a live, like it was an IGTV video, and it was about 9 minutes and 30 seconds long. And the longer I watched, the angrier I got, because I was like, why does he still have his knee on his neck? And then like the video showed the other two police officers who were on his back as well, and I was like, what is going on? Like, this cannot be happening in America right now. So I watched it, and I just got really upset.
Well, for those people who haven't seen the video, what are your thoughts about the situation in general? Like, what are your thoughts, even though you haven't seen the video? And anybody can, raise their hand and I'll unmute you if you want to answer that question, or you can. Oh, here you go. Sorry.
Well, I did watch it, but I watched it because he looked familiar. He looks like a family member, like most of the victims in these type of situations. My father is 6'5". It could have easily been targeted, just coming out of a store. So.
Yeah, one thing that a lot of people do. Well, one thing that I haven't really been hearing a lot of people discuss is George Floyd's size. He was like a 6'6". He was a big man. And if you saw different videos, you could see that it was two officers on his lower body, and it was another body, and like the other officer on his neck. But those three men took up pretty much his entire body almost. He still had his legs free, but his body part took up the size of three men. And I was wondering, like, does anyone think that the outcome would have been different if George Floyd was a white man and was the same size? You can go on ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to comment on that. We'll start with Megan Horn.
I think if he would have been a white man, people would have been kind of like, they still would have been outraged, but they would have been outraged more. They would have been like, well, why are they doing this? Like, he did nothing wrong. I can't believe they're doing this. This isn't part of the training. But in this case, people tend to default to, well, why did they do this? There had to have been a reason. Look at his size. But if he's white, they would have automatically went on the defensive and been like, no, this isn't right. But because he's Black, they want to automatically push blame onto the victim.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next we'll do Steven. Go ahead and unmute your mic.
Hi, I go by my middle name. I'm Mike, and I'm one of the
Mike.
librarians. No, it's
Sorry.
totally fine. I just cannot imagine it having turned out the same way, because I just can't imagine a situation, the officers even being there, or with that many people going so extremely in it for such a trivial matter. I just cannot imagine would have occurred. Like, the situation would have even happened.
You can go on ahead again, is Renee.
Hi again. So my take, I don't think the situation would have progressed as it did for the police, like the young man before me just said. I don't think the police would have been, arrested him had he been a white man, a big white man. The conversation would have ended in the store where it all started, when he wrote the check, and it wouldn't have been a question of doubt of whether or not the check would have been valid or not, or if it would have been voided or not, or anything like that. I don't think the situation would have escalated to that point, and I'm upset that it had to get to this point for people to even realize, hey, there's a difference between the two. There is a difference. You know what I mean? That's my take.
Next we'll have Kristen.
Hey, thank you. I have a question for Professor Holloman and Professor Cotton. Do we have any information regarding statistics or court cases that would kind of help support this idea of like what would have happened to him had he been white? Like, do we have, or do they not exist because they would never have gone to court?
I can answer from my personal experience. So as I said, I was a public defender for 3 years in Prince George's County, Maryland. And I can count, no exaggeration, I may have had 10 clients who were not African American in 3 years. And I don't believe that African Americans are the only ones in Prince George's County driving on suspended licenses, the only ones in Prince George's County with marijuana, only people in Prince George's County with cocaine. They're not the only ones in that county breaking the law. But you have to look at who the police and where they police. And I guarantee you that the police have their attention, their mind, and their focus on minority communities. And that's why when you go to court, you see nothing but minorities in that courtroom. That's where the police place their attention. If Mr. Floyd was a white man, the police would never have been called. The check he was trying to cash would never have been even questioned by the owner at the store. That would never have happened. But because Mr. Floyd was African American male attempting to cash a check, or if money, they thought it was fraudulent cash, they then alerted authorities. That would never have happened if he was a white man. That's the reason.
Does that answer your question, Kristen? Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think it was just trying to figure out, in this really complex situation when we have people issuing counter arguments, like, do we have a way to support this with data? And I guess the data is that there is no data because white people are just not being stopped because of all of the systems in place that are designed to be oppressive and discriminatory.
There is some data. For example, drug offenses. White people use drugs, illegal drugs and recreational drugs, etc., as frequently as persons of color, but the arrest rate, the imprisonment rate is vastly different. So that, as Professor Holloman said, who you target is who goes into the pipeline for the criminal justice system. So we do have statistics like that show some kinds of offenses being committed in equal rates regardless of your race, but not equal rates when it comes to arrest and imprisonment. So there are those statistics. Mm-hmm. I just want to jump in with one last thing. I thought, my understanding was that it was a counterfeit $20 bill that was the start of the whole thing. I think that's especially weird because a person can unwittingly pass a counterfeit bill, and the assumption instantly being on the part of police that it had to have been something that he did intentionally, and not that it would justify even if it was. But I thought, going back to a question someone asked previously, I think Ashlyn did ask this question, they would never assume that a white person who passed a counterfeit bill had done it on purpose. So that is a big difference.
And then one thing I like to add about, counterfeit money, like I've worked in retail and I've worked in restaurants. Usually you check it, you mark it, and if it's fake, you give it back. Why wasn't that the situation here? Maybe we won't ever know. Next, I would like to have unmute Ted. He had his hand raised for a while.
Yeah, for me, the answer to that question of whether or not it would happen if it was a white person, it's clear as day. If you look at those people who went to the state capitol with military-style assault rifles and protesting the fact that they had to wear masks, and they were seen as peaceful protesters, and just the complete opposite.
Someone did ask a question in the chat that I wanted to address. So Mr. Ray McCree asks, the Eric Garner video showed a Black man being killed by a police officer in the same type of fashion. Why is the response different now? And I think that it's different now because first off, I think the situations are very, very similar. I think that in both situations, Eric Garner was unarmed. Eric Garner was not resisting arrest. He was cooperating with police for the most part of the time. It was also recorded. The entire situation was recorded, and none of the police officers were indicted for his death. They were all acquitted, and they even said that the chokehold that they used was illegal, so there was no justice for Eric Garner's death. And I think the response is different now because we have different angles of before, during, and almost after the situation occurred. We have different angles of the video, like of the situation. And also, I think that, we just can't let the same thing happen twice. So given that, Eric Garner, that situation happened, everything unfolded, and there was no justice, we saw how that went down first. And then it happened again in the same fashion, and I don't think people will let it happen again. So although people are responding differently, I think that it's a good thing that people are responding differently, because you can't let the same thing happen again in the same way. Like, does that make sense? Go ahead, and Angela, I saw your hand up, and then we'll go to Dean Spencer.
I think what was different is that it was 8 minutes and 47 seconds that we watched. It wasn't nothing that was instantaneous. It wasn't no shot. It wasn't like he was scared. It wasn't like he was pushing. The guy was laying down and couldn't do anything. And he held him for 8 minutes, 47 seconds on his neck. So you can't deny that. You can't deny that. He can't say that he was in fear of his life at that moment.
Not at all. Very true. Dean Spencer, you can go ahead and.
I think the other thing at play here is that we live in a different political environment, and there's a lot more divisiveness in the world, and we have a leader who is encouraging that divisiveness and not bringing us together. And so people need to express their outrage, and it can't be expressed in the legal system because it's all rigged at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then can I jump in, Ashlyn, just to add to that? Mm-hmm. I think another thing that makes this situation different is that we're in the midst of a pandemic, and the trauma related to not only going through a pandemic, but then now seeing the racial injustices still going on in the midst of this pandemic. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a sociologist, but there's trauma already related to us being locked down going through this pandemic. And then during the course of this pandemic, realize that this COVID-19 is affecting minority communities worse than other communities. So as a minority, not only now I have to worry about the trauma related to preventing myself from getting sick, but when I step outside the door now, I have to deal with police brutality, police misconduct on top of that. So as a community, we were already broken down to a point because of this disease, and then we were broken down even more because of this other disease of police misconduct, police cruelty, that it reached a breaking point where now we can't just continue life as is, and something has to change. And now that's why it's different, is what I would propose.
Next we'll have Michael and then Naya, so I'll unmute that.
I think one of the factors that make this different is the series of issues that happened around racial injustice right around the same time. The same day we had Amy Cooper, calling the cops on an unarmed Black man just because he asked her to put her dog on a leash, which is the law. And I think a month or two before that, we had Breonna Taylor. So it's a sequence of issues that happened right around the same time that, struck people's attention and said, oh, this has got to come to a stop. I think that's one of the things.
Thank you. And then we have Naya.
Yeah, so I think one of the major differences between the Eric Garner situation and George Floyd, especially with people speaking out on social media, is that people, I think, are taking the time to educate themselves and really think about the difference between police interactions with white people versus Black people. And then there are a lot of people who I think are afraid of being called out because, especially because there's a video, so it's not really up for debate, what happened. And it's no excuse for them to not speak up on what's happening because it's just clear as day. So
Thank you, Naya. Go ahead, Ted.
I think since about 5 years ago, the unrest in Baltimore happened, as well as Ferguson and countless other places. The people who were involved in those protests are now older and are much capable of building a bigger organization around the topic. And I feel like it's kind of like a result of those protests from 2015.
Yeah, it is indeed. I have a question.
Well, hey, Ashley, Diane was trying to talk. I think she's in the chat.
Okay, hold on, let me go back.
Okay.
I think it's being a little slow. Okay, going to the chat. Who did you say?
Diane, she said she had her hand up for a few minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can go ahead and unmute your mic. I'm sorry.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, I did have my hand up. I just wanted to say I didn't watch the video. I couldn't watch the video. Just hearing about it hurt too much, and I've been thinking about it a lot, and I just don't want to compound on that. But my roommate brought up a good story to me the other day. We were talking about kind of the past, and I'm going to be 42 this year. So this happened like 15, 20 years ago. I don't even know, my young 20s. And it may make you change your thoughts about me and my character. But a long time ago, I grew up in like white area of PA around Pittsburgh. We were driving around in Pittsburgh. It was late night. We had pulled over to like look over a bridge at something, got back in our car. I forgot to turn my lights on. We started driving. I passed a cop. He had one headlight out. And I was like, oh crap, my lights aren't on. So we turned down our street, and we were probably like 4 blocks from my house. And my roommate looks at me, and I was like, he's going to come after us. And, we had been drinking earlier that night, whatever. My roommate was like, go, go, go. So I was like, all right. And I went. And then that cop came, and he was behind me. And finally I pulled over. But I fled from the cops. Like, I admittedly fled from the cops. Pulled over, he got a spotlight out, put a spotlight on us, get your hands out of the car, put your hands on the car, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I did that. I'm half Asian too, so I'm not white, whatever. But he gave me a pencil test, he did whatever. This man was like, I could arrest you right now for fleeing and evading, blah, blah, blah. He allowed me to park my car and walk a few blocks home. My roommate was like, could you imagine if we would have been 2 young Black males, like how differently that would have played out? He let me like get in my car, park it, and then just walk home. So that just, if you talk about being privileged, I'm not fully white, but I grew up pretty white. That's, I think, a telling story right there.
Thank you. I think that is a good example of how the system is not colorblind and how everybody has different experiences with the law. And I know that I've had weird experiences with law enforcement. Like, for example, I got pulled over by a police officer, and he pulled me over because I had my earphones in. Okay, even though I'm using a hand, like it's a non-handheld device. My earphones are in, whatever. And then he's like, well, I'm sensing a bit of attitude. And I'm like, yeah, because I thought I was following the law. Like, how did I know that earphones were illegal? So then I give him my license, and he comes back and he's like, do you have another form of ID? And I'm like, what? Like, this is my license. Like, what other form of ID am I supposed to give you? It's not fake. So I ended up having to give him my school ID as well, which was just weird because it's just like I gave you my state license. You know, it's just little things like that. Even though it's not like it might not seem like a big deal, it still does have an effect. You know, and it's even situations even more serious than that. You know, that people experience. And I thank you, Diane, for sharing yours. The question that I had for Dr. Cotton and Professor Howland is like, aren't people usually arrested with much less evidence? Like, we clearly see this man with his knee in his neck, and it took them, you know, a long time to really admit that this was a murder that was filmed. Like, you know, it seemed like it's taken them a long time to really acknowledge that this man actually died. You know what I mean?
Yep, you're absolutely right. A typical person could get arrested on a lot less. In the state of Maryland, my wife could call the police and say, I punched her in the face. The police could come to the house and I could be walking out the house in handcuffs, sitting in Baltimore Central booking at least 24 to 48 hours waiting to get released. If my wife really sold it up and said I pulled out a knife or something even more serious, I could be sitting in Central booking until my trial date based off of something she just said. Whereas in instances where police are involved, they get special treatment. Why is there special treatment? The police are an arm of the state. So you think about the criminal justice system, if you think about law and order, the police make the arrest, they take the paperwork to the prosecutors, and the prosecutors prosecute the case for the police officers. Well, that creates a conflict of interest when the police officer is the one alleged to have committed a crime because they're all buddy-buddy with the prosecutors. So how do you prevent that special treatment from happening? Sadly, it's hard to prevent it from happening. But if you look at Minnesota, what happened now is they took it out of the hands of the state prosecutor and put it into the hands of the attorney general. So that creates the optics that it's going from buddy-buddy relationship between the cops and the prosecutor to prosecute the case for them daily to a separate agency prosecuting the case that doesn't have that day-to-day interaction with officers. And that's how you avoid that. But sadly, 9 times out of 10, officers will get that special relationship because they know the right people. Does that answer your question, Ashlyn?
Yeah, it does. And, you know, I even talked to a man who was a firefighter, and he told me that he suffers from, you know, alcoholism, and he's been drunk and driving many times, and he's had gotten many DUIs, but every time he's been pulled over, he was never really like given any type of stern consequences because he is a firefighter. Although the two fields are different, I think those two, I guess, conditions are similar in that police officers get special treatment under the law, and so does other officials like firefighters, etc. But two totally different entities. But it's just appalling that, like, you know, I had a cousin who was taken out of class in high school and was arrested in front of all of his friends and taken down to central bookings and had to stay there overnight because he had the same name as someone who actually committed a crime. There was no evidence that my cousin did the crime, but, you know, they were still able to arrest him and pretty much almost charge him, but with no evidence. And it just took them a long time to charge their, well, you know, the former officer without, you know, like with the video. Does anyone have a comment about that? You can go ahead, Sarah.
I was talking about this with some other professors actually at Towson, and they mentioned the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, and that's a special protection document for officers in Maryland that prohibits them from being prosecuted. And I haven't read it. So I was hoping that some of the people who are more aware of the legal boundaries of this document could share that and talk about this idea that law officers in Maryland get special protections and what that means.
I've never heard of that particular document, but I can tell you that throughout the country, the states have been influenced by a Supreme Court case. It's Graham versus Connor, in which the Supreme Court, they weren't even talking about police misconduct per se, but they were talking about what constituted illegal searches and seizures. And they articulated a very permissive standard for police officers, saying something along the lines of, we shouldn't be guessing why they did what they did and this is the term they use, 20/20 hindsight. And I think that there is a sense that police officers are in a unique position and they're entitled to special deference from the law. I don't think there's like a statute per se that says that, but Maryland, for example, has adopted the Supreme Court's idea that you really shouldn't be second guessing officers with 20/20 hindsight.
Next we have Michael, then Sarah, then Diane. So I'll start with
Hey, Ashlyn. When you say what should we do now, do you mean as individuals, or do you mean as like policy makers and people in power?
I am shooting for both. I feel like each of us can do things on a micro level, and there are also other individuals who have the power to make change on a macro level. And I just was wondering, like, what are people's suggestions? What are some ideas about, what individuals can do and what us as a whole community can do?
On a macro level, I think I don't want to say it's too easy to be a cop, but it's not as hard as it needs to be either. I know the training time differs from state to state, but on average it takes like 5 to 6 months. That's a little over one college semester. That's like someone spending one semester in law school and then graduates to be a lawyer. So you spend about 6 months in training to be a cop, and then you get to carry a lethal weapon. So I think the training needs to be more than 6 months. And look at other things like being a hairstylist. You need about 12 to 24 months to get a hairstyling license, but then you only need 6 months to carry a gun. I mean, that's really crazy. So I think the training needs to be at least 24 months, and it's just too short.
I agree. Would you be interested in like trying to start a movement that I guess puts pressure on those entities who have the power to extend those training times?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. No. Sarah, I'm gonna unmute you.
Okay, thank you all thank you for this. I'm so happy to be part of UB and to be part of this conversation. Couple things I just wanted to add. I teach in the conflict and negotiation program at UB. One is that when we found out that the cadets were going to be coming to UB, I approached the commissioner to get permission for us to have ongoing dialogues in a regular way with UB students and the new cadets. For the students at UB to just be able to share their experiences with the cadets so that cadets can hear what it's like to grow up in Baltimore. And the cadets haven't done anything wrong yet because they're new, as far as we know, right? But if anybody would like to, maybe we can do them now, right? Maybe we can start to have some of those now with our cadets, right? Because they're kind of part of the UB community. I don't need to be in charge of that, but I'm happy to help facilitate that conversation or to have you facilitate it. But that's someone right on our own front door. The other is I'm doing a book group with students just to keep talking about, and faculty and staff, just to keep these issues. So we're talking about it and thinking about how they're showing up in our lives in all different ways, and whoever said how we can work it in our own networks. For example, today I just received an email from this great think tank in DC that fights for democracy and against corruption, but it was on fighting global white supremacy globally or something. But every panelist was white. So I suggested to them in kind of as loving way as possible, I'm super glad you're doing this, but don't you think it's a little weird that everybody on your panel is white? Maybe that's where we can start. So working those networks, but I'm going to put my email in the chat. So if anybody would like to join the book group, let me know. Or if you're interested in some way working on this with these cadets, see if we can get something started sooner.
Thank you, and I'll also put my email as well, because I know there's a few students who are interested in just creating that dialogue and starting just like something to get, just to start some type of reform. Diane, you can go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, so I think on a micro level, something we can do is when anytime you're in conversations or if you hear someone say something that's a little off, speak up and say something. And then something else that can be done. I mean, I know for me, for my company, I work for a large company here in Baltimore, and we have diversity inclusion groups, we have women's groups, we have a pride group, we have all these things. So I think that that's important to get that education out there and have people talk and, talk to each other and try to recruit other people to be part of the movement. So, if you work for a company or when you do graduate and start to work for a company, if they don't have groups like this, maybe they can be started so that we can help to spread the word.
Thank you. Dean Hartley, you can go ahead and unmute your mic.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. We had a great discussion yesterday also, and some of the things that can be done too that I've been kind of evangelizing for over the years with our students is getting involved in city boards and commissions and things like the Civilian Review Board that actually does oversight of police departments. It's interesting, if you look at the local level, these boards and commissions, they seem like things that wouldn't take an average everyday so-called person, that you have to be politically connected. But what's interesting is many of them go unfilled because no one volunteers for them or no one applies for them. And so I've always wanted to say and encourage people to get involved at that level. I mentioned in the chat earlier that Dr. Bridal Pearson, up until very recently, led the Civilian Review Board here in the city of Baltimore. And through his courageous leadership and that commission, he took on the city. They filed a lawsuit to gain access to essentially secret police records of police brutality so that Civilian Review Board could in fact analyze them and hold police accountable. There's amazing work being done all over, and I just encourage that kind of involvement. One other thing that came up in our discussion yesterday too that was really interesting is we were talking about the idea of engaging with the police cadets, which is a great idea, and making sure that we do a better job of training officers. But one of our colleagues, Professor Nader from criminal justice, pushed back and noted that one of the biggest problems with police corruption and brutality is not just having well-educated officers, but it's also that the culture of police departments is such that as soon as a well-trained, highly educated, ethical officer enters the force, they are then confronted with a system of institutional racism that can undo all of that work. And changing culture is terrifically hard. And that is something that has to come from oversight, regulation, and changing the leadership of police forces as well. And frankly, breaking into the FOP and the unions. Those are pieces of the puzzle that are very hard and are in fact still problems. But thank you all for having this event. I wanted to just say this is terrific, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to come.
No
Ashley, let me jump
problem.
for a second.
Mm-hmm.
There's two things I think we can do that are very simple. The first thing, as someone posted, a lot of people posted in the chat already, is vote. But when we vote, we want to make sure we vote for every position that's on the ballot and know who we're voting for. For example, it's easy to know voting for mayor. It's easy to know who to vote for president. They're prominent positions. You do your research. But what about the judges who are up for re-election? What about when the prosecutor's up for re-election? What do you know about those judges? What do you know about those prosecutors? Who should receive your vote? What if I told you this one judge you want to vote for blindly gave max sentences for petty drug offenses? Would that be a judge you would want to be re-elected? So when you vote, make sure you know who you're voting for. Every position on your ballot is important, not just president, not just mayor, but every single position on your ballot. The second easy thing we can do as a community to move forward is to look forward to sitting on juries. You get your jury summons, and everyone looks for every way possible to get out of sitting on the jury. But just imagine you're a criminal defendant. You want a jury full of people like us who see the world differently, who don't have this racial prejudice in their mind. Not suggesting you would have to find everybody not guilty, but you're coming in with an open mind and not a mind clouded by prejudice. If I can have a jury full of people like you guys who see the world as it is and without that guise of prejudice, I think that would change the system. So we change the prosecutors, we change the judges, and we look forward to jury duty, and we vote intelligently. Do all those things together, I think we could definitely have an impact on the system.
Yeah, and one thing that I do wanted to add before we close out, or we could continue to talk for a little bit longer, maybe till 5:15. Is that okay with everyone? 5:15 is good. So one thing I did wanted to point out is a lot of white people ask me like, what can I do to help? What can I do? How can I, how can I stop racism? And the thing is, like, I appreciate those questions because racism didn't start with Black people. Black people didn't, go out and say, hey, yeah, colonize us. Maybe they did. I wouldn't know. But, the concept of racism started with, white people. And I think that it will take white people to end it, go into different communities and schools and teach those underprivileged people or minority students or whatever, donate to these different organizations, mentor as many Black and brown kids as you can. One example that I can give is the Fannie Angelos program through UB. They primarily focus on mentoring and tutoring and prepping HBCU students for the LSAT. And if some of you don't know that, the LSAT is kind of discriminatory in some ways on how they ask certain questions. So it prevents a lot of Black and brown students who aren't equipped with the tools to prep for that test to not pass it or not do well on it. So the Fannie Angelos program gives Black students those tools to be able to take that test at a low cost because, financial barriers are an issue as well. So things like that is very helpful. And also, just really quick, I met a guy back at the Kevin, what was the conference that we went to in not too long ago? It was like the Civic Fellows.
It was the Slice conference. It's Anthony's on here. He'll know the full acronym.
Service Learning and Civic Engagement Conference.
So I went to that conference and I met a guy who he was a professor at University of DC, and he was a white man, and he made his classrooms. He specifically built his classrooms for the sake of mentoring Black students. So what he would do is he would have like a capstone class. Each and every student has to take a capstone class. And his class was primarily, having maybe 5 or 6 students, all Black. And he would mentor them. He would give them skills. He would give them tools. He would take them to conferences. He would take them to meetings. He would pretty much use his privilege to expose them to a world or to connections that they would not otherwise have connections to. So I think that is really powerful and important, and it doesn't exclude any other race. It doesn't exclude anybody else, but instead it enhances different resources that one person can pass on to another person, and another person can pass on to that person. So it's just a trickle effect. And I kind of wanted to get that out there. And if you want to pass on that message to other people, feel free. But it's something that can help short term and long term. Does anyone have any questions or comments before we close out?
I was going to say something just quickly, which is we have a very, very diverse campus where I think we're in some ways, we're the most diverse campus in the state in some ways. But I think one thing that I'm hopeful for is that on our campus, we can open up a dialogue around anti-racism and using that term. I think that's been a term that a lot of people on our campus have been afraid to use. I think diversity and inclusion is a good start, but I think there's a lot of people, especially in the last 10, 15 years, who are saying diversity is just a first step. We actually have to name the problem of racism. And especially we, white people have to take a big step forward to say, we're going to commit ourselves to combating this problem. We're going to try to talk to other white people to stop doing racist things. We're going to try to check ourselves when we do things that may be racist, maybe, implicit bias. But I'm hopeful that we can start opening up that dialogue on our campus, because it's something we need to be talking about more. And that could be a student group. There's a group called Showing Up for Racial Justice. It's a national group that has chapters, but I think Sarah Gilchrist is right that there's room for that.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Professor Hudgens?
Hi, I think somebody mentioned in the chat that there's going to be a discussion after this about a group. Is that the case?
Yes.
So is that a different Zoom invite?
So if anyone is interested in being a part of that discussion, you can email me, and then we'll create the Zoom or group chat or whatever we choose to use as our form of communication. So you can email me, I'll put everyone in a group chat, and then we can have a Zoom conversation, if that's okay. And my email is ashlyn.woods@ubalt.edu. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Does anyone have anything else? We have a few more minutes. Make sure I take my favorite professor's classes next semester. Online, offline, everything.
I had a question for everybody. If anyone was able to see the live stream of George Floyd's memorial funeral service. Apparently Fox News was streaming it today. It was on at like 2:00. That was when I woke up, and that's like what I got to see. And before this call, it was still going on, and they had a moment of silence that lasted for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which was to represent how long the officer had his knee on his neck. I just wanted to see if anyone else had a chance to watch it.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I actually didn't see it, but Professor Kasner said it was a really nice event, very powerful.
Yeah, I had a question to see if anyone got a chance to catch the he's like a really prominent figure yes, Al Sharpton. Thank you, Ted. That's who I wanted to catch. That's it. Thank you.
Does anyone have the link to the memorial? If so, you can just drop it right into the chat if you do. And then we will hear from Zoe.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you so much again for hosting this and for this conversation, and just going back to the discussion about things that we can do on the individual level. Something that I've been thinking a lot about has been skill-based volunteering. So how can we use our professions or what we're learning in school to be able to use those skills? And so I'm in the design program, the interaction design program here. And so I've been thinking a lot about, how can I use the skills that I'm learning to support this? So I'm always looking for extra resources about skilled-based volunteering. I know a couple of organizations, but if anyone has any resources on that, I'd be really interested to hear about them.
Okay, well, I'll start by including you in the group email, and then I'm sure that you will have skills that will be able to help move something forward. I mean, everybody has their own individual skills and tools that they can contribute to any type of group.
That would be great. Thank you so much for organizing this.
No problem. Okay. Does everyone have my email or have any questions? Because I've already been getting emails, so we can start. It seems like it's gonna start immediately. All right. Well, thank everyone for coming. I really, really, really appreciate it. I hope this, helped many people start to process what's been going on and heal from what's been happening. So I thank you. And if you have any questions about anything, feel free to email me or any of the professors that help facilitate it, Professor Holloman, Professor Davis, or Professor Cotton. They will email you immediately. They will respond right back. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks so much. Y'all have a great rest of the day.